Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Corey Glenn with Blue Sky Bio. If you ever do any printed or even milled hybrid restorations that are monolithic and you're finding the pink to be a really challenging process, then this video is going to show you how I achieve that in under 10 minutes, and it ends up looking really nice. It's a very easy process, and beyond that, it's one that's going to hold up. It's going to last a lot longer than just surface level stains. So in this video, what I'm going to show you is how to take just your raw CAD hybrid design, something like this, and achieve a cutback on the facial aspect that looks something like this. And then you can print or mill it, and then you'll be able to, in under 10 minutes, achieve pink aesthetics like this. So if you're interested, let's start going through it. Okay, so let's start this process out in the software. Again, this is just my raw hybrid design straight out of the CAD software. This could come from ExoCAD, Blue Sky, 3Shape, doesn't really matter. But one of the things I do like to do just to make my own life easier is make sure I do have a well-defined gingival margin, because that's going to make this next step much easier, where I start doing the cutback. Okay, so think outside the box a little bit. Right now we're in Mesh Mixer. And one of the reasons I like to do this in Mesh Mixer is I can go over here to edit and say generate face groups. So when you do that, what the software is doing is it's looking for changes in the angle of the mesh. So when you encounter a sharp angle transition, like from tooth to gingiva, again, why I want that really crisp, it's going to separate that off into different face groups. Okay, so for example, if I was to, let's try that again. Just double click now on the gingiva. You can see here that by and large, my gingiva has been separated off really nicely. Okay, if you do that and it doesn't segment all the teeth off perfectly, you can play with this angle threshold, right? And that's going to make it where a lower angle threshold will separate those teeth off. Okay, so number of ways we can do this. Let's see. So that one is still not connected, and again, I'm looking, and that is because here you don't have a really sharp angle transition, and thus it didn't separate that. Okay, I'm also just going to be doing a facial segmentation, so I don't really need to go back into this area. All right, so we could separate that off. I'm also going to separate off here, and then that same little area that doesn't have that transition. All right. And then while I've done that, I'm going to hit Control G. That means everything I had selected right there, let's turn that into a face group. All right. Now I'm going to just click on these teeth on the facial, hit G, which is expand to groups. Okay, so I'm still connected somewhere. Let's double click here again and find out where exactly this is all connecting. All right, right there. It's bleeding through. And the other thing you can do, if you end up having to do this manually, right now, look if I do this. So if I erase, there's no distinction between that. But if I play with this crease angle threshold, I can come in here now, and without even being careful, I'm not worried about bleeding over, because that is going to stop it from bleeding over. Okay? And then we can do that if we wanted to pick up some triangles. All right, so we could do that there, there. And you can see I don't have to be real precise with this, because I'm not really worried about bleeding over onto the adjacent surface because of that sharp angle. And so I'm just picking up all of these face groups. Again, here I can erase using that angle threshold. All right. And now I want to turn that into a face group, because now I've excluded all the facial of those teeth. So Control G, that generates a face group. Alternatively, if you selected all this, you could hit I for invert and create a face group of just that. All right, now let's think about, where do we want to stop this cutback? Okay, so I'm going to just take this and basically go right where it transitions from the intaglio to the facial aspect of the gingiva. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Again, I want to go right up to that transition, and I'd rather not cut into any of these areas where my internal bar framework is going to fit. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let's Control G, just created a face group of that. So now essentially this area right here is what I want to do my cutback on. And if you look and you see a little area that you've missed, again, just go clean that up. You don't have to be perfect with this, right? That would be good enough. Everything else looks fine. Okay. So one thing I'm going to do is just smooth the boundary. So you can all do all of these things that I'm going to do right here. So under modify, you see optimize boundary, smooth boundary, but I use all these hotkeys. So I'm going to hit O, that's optimize boundary, B, that's smooth boundary. Okay. And what I'm going to do is now separate it. I can do that under edit and separate, or I can hit Y. So now you see that this is two different meshes. All right. So the reason I've done that is because I'm going to now take this. This is the full contour gingiva, right? So I'm going to select it all and then go to edit and offset. And I want to shrink that back. This is the area I'm wanting to cut back. So if I wanted 1 millimeter of gingival cutback, I could do my offset distance at a -1. So just to look again here, this mesh is facing outward. So if I do an offset, edit, offset, if you go in the positive direction, it's going to expand it outward from that direction the mesh is facing. But if I go -1, which I've got here, it will offset it internally. Okay, so I'm going to accept that. And now that's given me this new surface. You see that it's highlighted internally here. And what I'd like to do is once again just separate that off. So I'll hit Y and we'll separate that. And now I don't need this outer one. Okay, so one little modification you'll have to do is because it offset internally, this mesh is inside out. So let's hit Control A, or you could just select all by double clicking it. And let's go to Edit, Flip Normals. All right. Now the only other thing I would do is, we could try to smooth out some of these little sharp interproximal points. So I don't want a really strong tool. Maybe a little bit stronger than that. And I'm just touching these little points. And anywhere I've got kind of a ragged edge, I'll just touch that as well. And you could also just select it all, hit B for smooth boundary, and accept that. And then if you still got just some little clinging points, you could either manually delete them, or what I'm going to do here is just select this boundary, turn on the wireframe, and just double click one of these edge triangles like that. And then I'm going to smooth it and delete it. All right, and then smooth it again. So now this is got this gingiva, and with the exception of that little whatever that is, looks great. Just delete that. All right, it's looking pretty smooth now. Turn back on your original mesh. Okay, so now you've got the original hybrid file, and now you've got your gingiva where you've done your cutback, right? So let's Control select both of those in your objects browser and combine. Don't do Boolean. This is not a time where you want to do Boolean. So now, again, I've got the wireframe on. That helps me to see this because what I want to do is just select an edge triangle, double click it, edge triangle there. All right, you see what I've done? And now I'm going to once again optimize boundary O, smooth boundary B. And now I've still got all this selected. Let's hit J. That's join right here. There you have it, a very simple gingival cutback. Okay, And I could now just export this, and that would be the object that I print. Again, you see there's defined margins here. It's going to be easy to run our gingival material up in here without getting it on the necks of the teeth. But we've also done a very minimal cutback where it's not going to affect the strength of this restoration much. So with that done, imagine now we've printed this, and now you've got this raw object. So going into this, as I'm going to start showing the clinical steps, or the lab steps, I guess, of applying this gingiva, one thing I would suggest is print this restoration, do your alcohol wash, but don't do the final cure yet, okay? Because I actually want to maintain a little bit of this oxygen inhibited layer on this so that any composites or whatever I apply to this next are going to adhere really well. I don't have any clinical evidence that that's critical, but it makes sense to me. And remember, we're going to be applying such a thin layer here that it's not really a problem to cure through the resin that we're going to put on there. Okay, so now let's go and look at the lab steps.
So this is for a lab case that's going out, and you can see I've got two of this exact same printed hybrid, but the only difference being that this one has a little bit of gingival cutback. Basically, I've done 1 millimeter of digital cutback on this. And the reason for that is because I want to actually place some gingival composite. Now, if you're doing a restoration and it's only got to last, 4 to 6 months, then you could just simply print it in its full contour and use something like the Taub elixirs just to paint in the pink, seal it with a good, resin varnish. I like the nano varnish from Dreve. And that's going to last, easily for 6 months. But when you get out beyond that, let's say you wanted to do this as, say, a long-term interim restoration, or even a, cheap permanent restoration for a patient. Now we're looking at time frames out beyond a year, and any kind of a surface level stain is going to wear off. And so it's not going to be the best looking hybrid if all of your pink turns to white, and now they've just got this monolithic white chunk in their mouth. So by doing the cutback, that leaves us a little bit of space where we can now apply some gingival composite. Now, you could always do something like Gradia gum or Annex gum, and obviously that looks excellent, turns out really well, but it's more expensive for sure. It's a lot more time intensive to apply. And so I'm going to show you one of the little hacks that I've done that has worked out really nicely, and it tends to work out, for a long term. You can get as fancy with it as you like, but its biggest advantage is it's cheap and it's quick to apply. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one that I've done the digital cutback on, and I'm going to use my Taub elixir. Okay, so this is the SO number 4. This is kind of not the lightest pink, but a pretty light pink. And I'm going to grab a somewhat fine brush. And what I'll do here is go ahead and I'm just going to apply this pink onto the area of gingival cutback. All right, so, oops, I think I was a little out of frame there. I'm just painting this on, right? Doesn't have to be super fancy. Again, this is going to serve as a base coat, because what we're going to end up doing is applying 3D printing resin in a pink denture shade over the top of this. Now you might wonder, why not just do that alone? And the reason is because I've only got 1 millimeter of cutback here, and if I do that, you're gonna not have a really great looking pink because the white is going to show through so much. So by doing this, we're already giving it that base level of pink, and then we're going to come back and apply the actual denture-based resin, which has some thickness to it and will not have the ability to wear off because it's going to be, at least 1 millimeter thick. So just getting in here, applying this everywhere. And I didn't do any cutback on the lingual because I don't really feel like that's, terribly important, but we can do the exact same thing on the lingual of this restoration and then just put like a little top coat of 3D printing denture resin. All right, so just about done with this. This is actually a lot easier to apply too in a quick manner, because normally you're trying to be really, finesse around the necks of those teeth so you don't get it on the teeth. Here, by virtue of the fact that I've got cutback, that leaves a very defined margin where I don't have to worry about getting anything overrun. Now, if you wanted to be fancy, then you could certainly do this. If you think about how gingiva looks, actually that's the darkest. Let me find. Here we go. So this is the 13. If you ever look at gingiva, right around the necks of the teeth and that fibrous attached gingiva, it's going to be fairly firm and pink. And then as you get up above that, you get into mucosa. Okay, so what we can do, since we're only going to have a thin layer and it's going to be somewhat translucent, I'll paint up here towards where mucosa would be in a even darker color. All right, just quick and simple. So now we're ready to apply the gingival composite. So this restoration happens to be printed in Ceramco's Crown Tech, and then Ceramco sells Denture Tech resin, which is their denture base. And so all I've done is I've just sucked up some of that Denture Tech resin in a syringe just to make it easy to apply. I do have a little sheet of foil, so when this is not being used, I kind of cover it because I don't want the ambient light to cure it. But let's just now apply this, and what I'm going to do is periodically just kind of freeze it using just a regular curing light. So I'm going to do about a 4-tooth region. Okay. So I try not to get right up on the necks of the teeth, but I'll use a brush to pull that down interproximally. All right, so just kind of poking that in. And you can see that the transparent nature of this kind of lets that staining shine through. Okay, we're going to just freeze that. Doesn't need a really long cure. I just want to freeze it until I get the bulk of it on, and then we'll put it into the actual curing oven, and that will fully harden all of this. All right. Once again, I'm going to get a little finer brush to do this. Just so I don't get it on the teeth inadvertently. Work it right up into those nooks and crannies. And you can even, because this is runny, you can even let gravity kind of help you out by putting it at a tilt like this so that it wants to run down into those embrasures on the teeth. Just don't go overboard and let it, ooze up onto the teeth proper. And if it's a little thick in places, you can just pull it back. Okay, let's freeze that. And then we'll just do this last section. So just pushing it right up into the embrasures and the gingival margin. If I get a little excess out this way, I don't really care. That'll be easy to polish off, but you're not going to really be polishing very easily anything that's up here interproximally. So I do want to be careful just in that area. All right. Now, one of the downsides to using resin as opposed to, say, a legit gingival composite is that it doesn't have a lot of body to it, so you're not going to get it to stay where you want it for very long. So if there are areas that you need to kind of fine tune or thicken up, then just do those isolated areas and then freeze them, because you don't have long before it's all going to start to slump out and run. All right, so I'm kind of just looking this over, looking for where I could use more resin, and I definitely want to thicken it up right in here. And you do want to make sure before you flash cure this that you don't have any bubbles or bumps or anything like that. Like I see a little rough spot right in there that I want to push it into. There we go. And then we're going to look, and I need some same area on the other side. Remember, you don't have to go crazy with the thickness here. We did 1 millimeter of cutback, so if I start getting much beyond 1 millimeter thickness of material, then I'm really kind of overbuilding this. There we go. Okay, so as you can see, that's a decent looking pink. Again, if you're trying to do this as a long-term interim restoration or as a poor man's hybrid solution, as you can see, this one's designed to have a metal framework, so I'd have zero problems whatsoever telling this patient that this could be their final restoration, provided that they're okay with the aesthetics. Again, you're going to have monochromatic teeth. That's the nature of printing, unless you do cutback and put in some translucents or composite or something. But most patients, I find, if you give them that choice, they are more than willing to compromise incisal translucency if they can have a more affordable restoration. And I'm always kind of bothered by the fact that we make this treatment so expensive that it's out of the realm of possibility for the vast majority of people. If you're in a working class area or blue collar area, not Beverly Hills, nobody cares about translucency. They want some teeth. They just want to be able to eat and smile. And frankly, monochromatic or not, it will look 10,000 times better than what they're working with. So give some more options to your patients on the restorative aspect. There's always going to be the place for the high-end aesthetic restorations, but we've got that down. We need to work on what are the affordable solutions that patients could potentially have that would open this treatment up for more people. And listen, for you as the treating doctor, do you want to do more implants and more cases and help more people or not? And if you do, which I would imagine you do, why aren't you considering this as an option? A printed restoration holds up really well, and if you put some kind of a metal or a Trilor or a Peak framework inside of it, again, what's the mode of failure? They're not going to break it through and through. Maybe they chip a tooth. Well, big deal, it's composite. Repair it in the mouth. Or in the worst case scenario, one reason I like metal is I could just, in the case of a large fracture, I could just burn this off, reprint this for $10, and we've got a brand new restoration. And that is going to be a really uncommon scenario. So again, the only thing I would do from here, if I was going to really do this as a long-term final, is I might put a little pink top stain right here, and then again flow in just a little bit of that denture-based resin, and then we've got a completed fixed hybrid restoration. Okay, and I think that looks pretty darn good. You know, it's even got, I don't know how well the video will show it, but due to the splotchiness and the various colors underneath there of the top stains that I applied, this has got depth to it on the gingiva. It looks really, really nice. So this is going to go into the curing oven, and this is going to be ready to go, quick and easy.